Hello, I'm Kimberlie Acosta. Welcome to the Native News Update. It's Monday, October 3rd, and many of the stories you hear here can be found at IndianCountryNews.com. And here's the news for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Dry conditions are bringing history to the surface. The drought in Texas has sucked lake beds so dry it's exposed Native American artifacts, and the trouble is looters are disturbing the sites. Sinking lake levels have exposed some of Hill County's hidden secrets. Fossils and Native American tools from 8,000 years ago are easy to find, and looters are taking advantage. Even in remote parts of Lake Whitney that was once buried under concrete for security, scavengers unearth and discard valuable history. Texas and federal law ban the removal of Native American artifacts from archaeological sites, but burial grounds have now been disturbed. It has been 2 decades since the lake has seen this low of a level, 20 years since anyone has seen these caverns. Authorities patrol the lake, but fear that the only thing that can truly protect the history is enough rain to end an historic drought. A Waukesha County judge said the Wisconsin state's effort to strip Mukwonago High School of its Indian nickname was unconstitutional. Judge Donald Hessen Jr. ruled last week in favor of residents who challenged the 2010 state law that allowed complaints about Native American nicknames and mascots. The judge agreed that the law as applied in the case against Mukwonago schools was unconstitutional because the decision maker, a Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction employee, had an imperishably high risk of bias. A former student registered a complaint against the school district over the Indian name. And last October, the DPI ruled that the mascot perpetrates stereotypes of Native Americans and is discriminatory. The district was given 1 year to drop the Indian mascots. Dogbane is considered a noxious, invasive weed, but it is also considered part of Native American tradition, used in basket weaving, fish netting, elk snares, and medicine. And that's how state archaeologist Kurt Rodel found himself working with 2 other guys to dig about 150 invasive plants out of the right-of-way of Highway 99 West, north of Corvallis, Oregon, not to get rid of them, but to move them to a better location. The story is the focus of a 17-minute video that the Oregon Department of Transportation recently uploaded to YouTube entitled "Soft as Silk, Strong as Steel."
Highway 99 is a major north-south route through Oregon, paralleling and at times part of Interstate 5. Connecting major urban centers with rural communities, the daily commuters and commodity movers traveling this route through Oregon's Willamette Valley usually focus on the road ahead, rarely noticing anything other than traffic. Robert Kenta, a cultural resources director with the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, is an exception. Traveling on 99, just north of Corvallis, he knew of a small patch of woody-stemmed plants growing along the highway shoulder. Much like an individual who knows foxglove as digitalis, a source of medicine for fighting cardiac disease, or realizes camas is actually a vitally important first food, Robert knew these plants to be useful. He was keenly aware of their traditional uses and cultural significance. He knew these plants needed to be preserved. This is the story of these plants, their role in history, their continuing importance today, and the cooperative spirit their rescue fostered between governments and government agencies.
I'm a Wasco native, I'm a Wasco weaver, and our culture was along the Columbia River for something like 12,000 years. In the late 1800s, we were forced off onto reservations, so we lost a lot of knowledge, especially about weaving and plant fibers. And slowly, we brought this knowledge back in the early 1990s, and I want to help revive the knowledge of the natural plant fibers, because there are a lot of people who are growing up and they want to preserve this knowledge of natural plant fibers.
Well, the project was based on my concern of dog-bane plants, Apocyninum cannabinum, that was growing in the ODOT right-of-way, and it was one of the most robust patches that I've seen. And most patches have been really decimated. There's been really active eradication efforts over the years. It's considered a noxious weed by most people, but it has really important cultural uses for making string and rope and all of the things that are made with string and rope traditionally, including a lot of basketry, soft bags, and especially a lot of the soft, closely woven bags that stored food materials. My understanding is that bugs don't get into the foods that are stored in them because they're repelled by the toxin in the fiber.
The project ended up being honored by the Federal Highway Administration as both an exemplary human environment initiative and an exemplary ecosystem initiative. It is one of only 6 projects nationwide to receive both distinctions in 2009. To watch the complete video, just go to YouTube and search "Soft as Silk, Strong as Steel." The Secretary of Veterans Affairs announced that the department awarded the Pasqua Tribe a grant totaling over $300,000 to establish the tribe's veteran cemetery on its reservation southwest of Tucson, Arizona. This grant will pay for the construction of approximately 350 casket grave sites, landscaping, and supporting infrastructures on approximately 2 acres of land. The cemetery will provide burial options for approximately 188 tribal veterans and their families. Owain Sinyain Sug de Banjamo Winan, an Ojibwe book for young readers, was chosen by the Center for the Book in the Library of Congress to represent Minnesota this year in the National Book Festival. Minnesota's Best Read is a set of stories originated by Ojibwe first speakers to entertain children, teach them the language and culture with modern, fun, humorous stories. The book is illustrated by watercolor paintings by Wesley Ballinger and published by Weegwas Press. Anton Troyer, Bemidji State University Ojibwe professor and editor of the book with John Nichols, said about 1,000 people in the United States and about 10,000 in Canada are fluent speakers of the Ojibwe language, which means that the language is near the brink of extinction. However, he said there has been a big comeback in the last decade. Schools like Nagane Ojibwe Immersion School in Benham, Minnesota, and Wadukadading Ojibwe Immersion Charter School in Hayward, Wisconsin, are creating first speakers among the youngsters, and the body of the Ojibwe literature is beginning to grow. Troyer says, "I just love that anyone who wants to read the best book in Minnesota this year has to read it in Ojibwe." For more information, you can visit birchbarkbooks.com. Nearly 200 years after the last gunshot rang across the peninsula, the conflict that forged the destiny of Niagara comes to public television in a comprehensive film, The War of 1812. After the turn of the 19th century, American soldiers clashed with British, Canadian, and Native forces to ultimately shape the geography and the identity of the eastern North America as it is known today. Historical figures depicted in the film include Tecumseh, William Henry Harrison, and James Madison, along with Canadian icons such as Governor General George Prevost, Laura Secord, and General Isaac Brock. The War of 1812 airs on PBS stations on Monday, October 10th. And for more information, you can visit pbs.org.
In June 1812, the young United States declared war on the greatest power in the world, Great Britain. For 2.5 years, Americans fought against the British, Canadian colonists, and native nations in a small but bitter war. Yet in the U.S. today, very little of the War of 1812 lives on in the public mind.
It's the forgotten war. It's the war that we don't know too much about. Why was it fought? Where was it fought? Why is it important?
It's the war that Americans have largely forgotten, but the British don't remember it either.
For the British, 1812 is when Napoleon marched on Moscow. They have no idea there was a war going on the other side of the world.
But if it's been forgotten in Britain and the United States, there is a place where people remember the War of 1812, Canada.
In our minds, the War of 1812 is where we defend our version of freedom and liberty and democracy.
The native nations that fought alongside the British would remember it too, but not as a victory.
There's this sense that we lost because what we lost was the ability to govern ourselves on our own land.
What lasted on every side was a mythical version of history.
Stories grew up that really departed from the truth. These were enshrined in the history books. This was a time when legend and myth often substituted for verifiable history.
Even real stories turned into legends. In Canada, both a frontier housewife and an aristocratic British general became national heroes. In the US, a Shawnee chief is still much admired, though he fought on the other side. And a war composed largely of American defeats is now remembered for a victory at New Orleans, Old Ironsides, the credo, "Don't give up the ship," and a star-spangled banner fluttering in the dawn.
1812 is a tiny war by world standards. Both sides are struggling to try and defend their own borders and attack the enemy. The total number of people killed in the war is very small compared to the major wars of the world, and yet it forges the destiny of a continent for 200 years to come.
And that's another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. I'd like to thank you for joining me and have a grand day.